Well, let's call the May 12th, 2021 CPC meeting to order. Agenda item number 1 is the review of the March 3rd, 2021 meeting minutes. Meg sent those around this afternoon. Has everybody had a chance to review those?
Yes.
Yes.
Anybody have any comments or suggested changes?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Under agenda item, where is it? Agenda item number 3. I don't know if it's typos or if I missed something kind of big. Are we funding a building? It's talking here about the Mack Truck Fire Truck Museum project. And then later on, it says selling the building. Are we in a museum project? It's under number 3, item number 3, and it's 4th bullet down, in case you have it in front of you.
I didn't catch that. Let me pull it up.
No, Mary, it's a fire truck. Kip,
Okay, well, it says
if you will.
review. Okay, so it says review of Mack Fire Truck Museum project application.
So Mary, I'm redacting the word museum. And
Okay.
what else is the other problem? Can you tell me where that is?
It says,
Where?
a 30-year restriction against selling the building could be added as a condition.
Yeah, it should say fire truck. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's great.
Good catch.
I think I'm so used to the historic preservation pieces relating to buildings. That's what I wrote.
Well, I didn't know if maybe I just,
No, you,
No, you didn't miss anything. Thank you for catching that.
okay, any other suggested changes?
I thought I had seen a couple of typos, but I'm not seeing them as I look now. But if I do catch them, I will send them over to Meg. They were only typos.
Okay, sounds good.
Anybody want to
So
make?
we don't have the March 24th minutes yet, right?
Yeah, and that's because the first 13 minutes are silent. And so I was harassing, I was trying to figure out like, so is the sound like it failed? Like what happened? And it's like at 15 minutes, that sound starts, but I didn't realize that until today. So I haven't finished the minutes for that meeting yet.
Can I just ask you, Megan, did you get in with the passcode I just sent you?
Yes, but I couldn't find it in any email for some reason. But the one that you sent me worked.
Someone else is trying to join now and saying that they have the wrong passcode, so I have to look back and see what I just sent you. She says it's incorrect, but I know it. You got in right with 441611.
Yeah, and this is Don Sanders. That's what I got in with.
that is the passcode that's on the city website. So it is available there in print.
Yeah, so it's 441611.
Okay, I'll just ask her to try again. 441611, right?
Okay, so back to agenda item number 1, which is the.
Yeah, I
March
wanted to say after I sent it, I caught one error and I fixed it, which was that after in the 3rd bullet point under agenda item 2, I had in the middle of a sentence switched to the next sentence without finishing saying, so CPC is the only vector for that funding. And then I switched to the next sentence, members spoke to the longstanding need in that neighborhood for that investment. So just, I did catch that error and I changed it in the
Great,
minutes.
thank you. I know that was one of, that was what I caught.
Anybody want to make a motion?
Sure, motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second,
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, and we're going to table the March 24th, 2021 meeting minutes until our next meeting.
Yes.
All right, agenda item number 2. So we have a request from the Holyoke Housing Authority to modify the Jackson Street affordable housing grant. The grant has been approved by the city council, but we have not executed an agreement on it yet. So that's the status. A quick summary of the requested modification is to reduce the grant amount from 200,000 down to 120,000, extend the time frame for the project from 12 months to 24 months. The total project cost would be reduced from 714,000 down to 643. And I'll point out that that reduces the percentage of the project that would be CPA funds from 28% down to 17%. Which is greater leverage of CPA funds, which is always something that the committee likes to see. So with that, I don't know, Amy, you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I just want to mention that the 120,000 was already approved, so that's not a change. And the other change is that they were asking for 15 years for the affordable housing restriction rather than in perpetuity. So these are changes that are different from what was sent to City Council that they voted to approve. So it really, if this is recommended, it would have to go through City Council again.
Yeah.
Right. So anybody else on the committee have any comments or we'll let Matt and Sarah give us a quick summary. You guys have stuff you want to add to what we've discussed so far? I mean, I didn't explain why the change. If you want to take a minute to do that for the committee's benefit or the public's benefit, that might be worthwhile.
Okay, so we were co-applicants when we first submitted our proposal to the CPA board. And under that particular dynamic, we were going to build one house. And Amy, I should point out, Amy is here from Habitat for Humanity, who's been a great partner to the Housing Authority and to the City of Holyoke for a bunch of years. We were going to build one house, Habitat was going to build the other. And so unfortunately, we went out to bid and the construction numbers came in astronomically high, twice our cost estimate. The building construction for the 1,400 square foot house was going to be about $550,000. And so we, quite frankly, panicked. That's a big number. And so we went back to Amy and asked if there was any way that Habitat would like to do two houses with the CPA funding. Habitat was also lucky enough to win an award through the city from CDBG money.
CDBG, yep.
And so, the Housing Authority is still committed to doing the site excavation and preparation for both houses and to make a monetary contribution to Habitat for the successful completion of the two homes. Mike Falsetti and the board saw fit to move that along. So we're excited about that. We're excited about the continued progress of this whole thing. I will say we're a little apprehensive about the idea, not knowing the regulations of the CPA. I didn't know I was hoping that there would be some wiggle room with minor modifications like something we are proposing. Simply because the time frame really becomes problematic. Habitat for Humanity is already out on the street looking. I'm sure people are familiar with the Habitat model. And Amy, I don't know if you want to explain it or if you want me to just keep going.
No, yeah, so we already started homeowner selection for the property and that part, because we knew we were doing that. And it's always kind of a process to get a family selected, because we require them to do some of the sweat equity with us while we're building. So we like to have them right at the beginning when we're getting ready to start. But because we do all of our work with volunteers, that's how we keep the cost lower than what Matt's bid came in, but it also does typically make our timeline a little bit longer than a regular developer would be.
I would hope that these are modifications that could pass the city council pretty quickly. It's very reasonable to have the 1-year extension. I do think that there might be some discussion about the affordability restriction, because you're really making a philosophical change between having the housing held as affordable forever and having the homeowners able to accumulate some equity in it. I'm certainly, not opposed to having that happen. But, that one may be a little more difficult, but I would think the time extension certainly could go through quickly. And maybe this will too. Maybe the council has other things to obsess about.
So
Okay.
in the terms that were presented to the city council, did we put perpetual
See,
approval restriction on it?
I'm not seeing that in the application, but I would defer to Sarah. She was more intimately familiar with the development of the application.
Well, it would be more, Matt, not what you guys proposed to us, but what we communicated to the city council as part
I
of
see.
our recommendation. And
Okay.
I don't know whether, off the top of my head, whether we proposed, perpetual or 30 years or 15. I just don't know. But I think
But that's
even
checkable.
the
Certainly.
12, and I don't know what kind of, see, we're a little bit caught.
Yeah.
A little bit of a catch-22 because likely your agreement, if it had been executed, would have language in it that would allow us to grant a 12-month extension, but we don't have an agreement yet. So it may likely requires going back to the city council.
And we're relatively confident that we'll have one house done within the 12-month part. It's just committing to two.
Yeah, and I can't speak for the committee, but I'm personally, it wouldn't bother me to give you 12 more months,
Yeah,
understanding
not at all.
what's going on in the world these days. But
Okay. So
so in fact, I think probably the safe thing to, at least for us to assume, is that we do as a committee need to take a vote. And if we were to vote, we could probably vote now on what conditions we would propose as part of our recommendation to the city council. And then, it goes to the council. Sometimes they deal with it on the floor. Sometimes it gets kicked to to the finance committee and then comes back to this. So it can be, you could be looking at a month-and-a-half delay if that's the process, but we have our process. I think I'm prepared to deal with this tonight.
Yeah.
I don't know what the votes will be and what people's thoughts are going to be, but then it goes to the city council and it's out of our control, It is a little bit, unfortunately, it would almost be better if we had a contract because we could probably give you the 12 months.
yeah.
And
Okay.
we could discuss, whether the perpetual versus 15 or some other finite number of years was material change or not. But I think we have to
Okay.
make it take.
Can I ask a question, Kip?
Sure.
Matt, what is the, in here, of course, it was marked in as in perpetuity. Is 15 years standard for other HHA properties?
Yeah, and we typically, when we're doing like home funds and CBG and things like that, it's usually been 15 years that we've done. The only time that we typically do perpetual is if it's going to be listed with the Department of Housing. When there's a city that's trying to meet a 40B requirement, but Holyoke doesn't really have to meet 40B requirements, you're already there. So sometimes when we're working with a smaller community that is trying to do that, then we'll go perpetual. And so it's not a deal killer if we have to do that. It's just something that I do need to make sure that the family that we would be bringing on understands that, because it kind of changes it a little bit when we're selecting the family and, letting them know what it means to have their mortgage and what'll happen after and things like that.
Yeah. How does it, can you speak a little bit more to that? Like, how does it change it in terms of like the type of family or how that a family,
So
interacts with
it
that
won't-
process?
It doesn't change it as far as the families selected because it's all based off of current income levels, and our families all have to be within 30 to 60% of the area median income. So that part stays the same. It's just in letting them know that after they pay their 30-year mortgage, if they did go to sell the property, that they're only going to get back or be able to sell the house at a certain level and to another lower income family. So it's just that knowledge that they know going into it, you know, where they stand with everything. So typically what we'll do is we'll usually do 2 mortgages on a house. And that the first mortgage is set, and that's the one that they make their payments on. And then we do a silent mortgage for the difference between what the homeowner buys the property for and what the market value of the house is, to lock in so that they can't get into their house and flip it. And we release that second mortgage after 15, 20, 30 years. So then, because I mean, if they've lived and they've made mortgage payments for 15, 20 years, it seems like they should be able to get a little something back, especially because a lot of them will be using it to help kids go to school or move, downsize as they get older, things like that.
So the pro to the 15 years is that the homeowner gets to build
Some assets.
equity based on market rate of the house. And if
Right.
there's a perpetual or 30 years or longer, then the amount of equity they're able to build in their home is constrained by that restriction.
Right.
100%.
But we do, you know, put measures in place because we don't want somebody moving in and flipping and walking away with a lot of equity like right away. So we usually make it so that they at least have to stay in the property, you know, 15 years at a minimum, because
Right.
the goal is to have them be members of the community and live
Right.
there.
Right, so that's an interesting tool that you use, that second mortgage. So, you know, I mean, just for conversation, but the downside is it's that after 15 years, or some other term, it is no longer required to be affordable housing.
Right.
I mean, so I think as a committee, we need to kind of balance those two things when we're thinking about. Mike Falsetti.
Mr. Chairman, there's nothing wrong with whatever they're proposing. If you build in equity, that's one of the reasons why you buy a house, and you stay in it until the kids go to college, or you're empty nesters, and you sell it at a profit. But given the neighborhood and given the economic strata of the average Holyoke person in that neighborhood, we're not talking somebody making a landslide killing off of the building, whether it's both of them or one or the other, or whatever the case may be. The market will determine, I think we're envisioning buying a house on Martha's Vineyard 50 years ago and then selling it now. It's not going to happen. The market will make a modest increase, a reasonable increase in the value of the house, but it won't be such that one could be accused of abusing the taxpayers' money. It won't be. The market will determine that, but it won't be so significant that it would make it a one person making a landslide off of the selling of his house. The market won't support that. The neighborhood won't support that. So it's reasonable to assume that we can reasonably expect the person who buys one of those houses to get a certain return on his investment. Yes, we are helping them out, but they won't win the lottery. I mean, we're not talking a seaside house on the vineyard. So I think everything that the Housing Authority, and we discussed it before at our meetings, is reasonable, both for we as the CPA committee and for the person or persons buying the houses. There's nothing extraordinarily burdensome or on either us or the city of Holyoke or the taxpayers. I think everything that's proposed here is reasonable and it's doable. And I'd like to get it voted on and passed to the city council for the modifications to the contract as soon as possible to get this going. I mean, we're talking about a quality of life issue changing for two people or two families. And the sooner it started, the sooner the better. 2 new houses in that neighborhood, 2 new families with new dreams and their own place, their own roof. That's the most important thing, the quality of life of the 2 families that will now live in it and add, you know, it's, as we all know, when you buy a house, it's life-changing. And for some people, this may be their first time ever owning a home. So I think I'd like to vote on it, Mr. Chairman, this evening, as it is stated. And if we need to send it to the city council, let's do it as soon as possible. So Amy can get her applicants selected and lining up the volunteers as soon as possible and get this project moving.
Yeah, no, It doesn't look to me, at least, as though there's any real disagreement about that. The only thing I would suggest is, I think voting on it tonight makes all the sense in the world. I would like to just, while we do this, dig into the records a little and see precisely what it is we told the city council, and whether we could just pass this ourselves without going back to them. I think if they reviewed an application that said in perpetuity, then we're going to have to ask them to change it. But again, I don't think this is controversial. I don't think they're going to give us trouble about it if we do have to send it back to them. And let's move ahead.
Amy, can you look and see what we provided to the city council when they took their vote?
Yeah, I actually,
Okay,
do you want me to look right now? I mean, I'm
Sure.
aware of what we did. I can pull it up right now.
Thank you. That would be great.
Okay.
I think
I was just thinking about the difference between time restrictions where we didn't really make it material and time restrictions where we did. Because if it's the usual, we have the discretion to extend it by 12 months kind of restriction.
we built that into the terms, which I think we did,
Yeah.
but we haven't signed the agreement. I mean, I think we could just,
Well, but if we had built it into the terms and we felt authorized to build it into the terms,
Right.
Maybe that authorization is still there. I'm also thinking about trying to not burden the legal department, which, as we all know, is really stressed at the moment.
I'm sorry, but I have access to the more recent things I've sent to city council for the new projects for FY21, and this isn't FY21. I mean FY20. I might be able to find it, but it'll take me longer than I thought.
well,
Well, but I think we can move forward without knowing it. We'll need to know it within a day or two, but we don't need to know it tonight to say we want to do this. And the only question before us is whether we have to send it back to city council or not. We'll know whether we have to send it back to city council when we've seen what we sent them the first time.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I agree with Mimi and what she said. I'd like to make a motion. We pass the modifications to the agreement that we have in front of us, both in time and the dollar amount. There's nothing here that's so extraordinary that we can't move on it right now, actually. So I'd like to make a motion that we accept the Housing Authority's modifications to the terms of that we now have in front of us, and get this ball rolling.
And if I may make a friendly amendment to that motion, I would move that we, in the alternative, either accept the modifications if it turns out to be within our power to just accept them, or in the event that it turns out we have to recommend these to the city council, let us make that recommendation to the city council that these changes be adopted and get that paperwork out.
Agreed. Good idea.
Sorry, Mimi, I didn't quite understand that. I was also multitasking with other things before that, so I don't quite, can you rephrase that?
I will try. The motion is that we vote in the alternative, either if it is within our power on examination of all of the relevant earlier documents, we approve the submission, or we approve the amendment to the grant, which would then allow us to move directly forward with changing the relevant terms. If on examination of the earlier recommendation, we find that it has to go back to the city council, we vote to recommend to the city council that they approve these modifications.
Yeah, I looked at it recently, so I'm sure that it has to go back to city council because I specifically looked at what was sent, even though I can't pull it up in this moment. And I know that it was for 12 months and, that the conditions were different. So I know we have to put it back to city council.
did we, as we have with almost all of the other proposed terms to these grant agreements lately, we also retained the authority as the committee to extend the term for 12 months without going back to the city council.
This might have been before that change was made. I'm just going to look in one other place just to see.
Yeah, if we did this without making our recent changes, then we may just be stuck. And we could also look at the debate before the city council and see what was actually said to them before they voted. But as I keep saying, I think even if we have to go back, we ought to be able to move this through quickly. It's just,
So we have a motion and then an amended motion. Do we have a second on this? And just for clarification, the terms that we're modifying are going from 12 months to 24 months, or granting the 12-month extension today, and going to a 15-year affordable housing restriction instead of perpetual, correct?
correct.
And also accepting that both properties will now be constructed by Habitat for Humanity instead of one by Holyoke Housing Authority. And I
Correct.
seconded it when.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other further discussion? Anybody have any comments? I'm not hearing any, so we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the proposed changes, whether or not they have to go to the city council to be determined. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right, we're all set. Matt, we'll try to communicate with you and Sarah whether or not we think it has to go to the city council.
Okay.
Okay.
So can I just ask one procedural question? So if in fact it goes back to city council, that doesn't need like a sponsorship from a counselor, just Amy forwards some paperwork to the city council.
Mike Sullivan is on this committee, and he's the one that brings them to the full city council. So he files the order.
Okay, perfect.
He usually does them pretty quick. Mr. Chairman, if I could interject, Matt, he usually is pretty quick about it, and he brings it right to the front and they vote on it. And thank God, it's really, for them, it's rather quick.
Okay, great. I wasn't sure if I had to go find a city councilor that would support it for me.
Right, and the risk is that it gets referred to subcommittee, and then you're talking 2 more meetings before you get your approved. And then we have to finalize the agreement, with the law department, but we've provided all the terms to them. It's getting on the top of the stack.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
But-
Well, I appreciate you guys
So I
considering-
usually draft this and send it to Mike Sullivan,
Okay, perfect.
and I'll probably send the original thing and then explain what the changes are. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. I
Right,
appreciate it.
let us know how we can help, okay? If something's going on and you need us to take some action, let us know, okay?
Certainly will. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
Hey, guys.
Be well.
Right. So that's agenda item number 2. We'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is the revised MIFA application under the historic preservation category for the theater murals. We have a slight reduction from 100,000 down to 97,500. And again, the idea being that the murals get restored, immediately, and then exhibited at City Hall, in the ballroom there, and they would stay there until the theater is almost fully restored, and they would move them over and put them back into where their original place was, home. Don, you're here still?
Yes, I am.
You want to add anything into
Happily.
what I've said, and then we'll go through with questions from the committee members?
No, I think it's such a great project. I love this idea of the murals being finished and being shown to the public. I think it's a win-win. I think people want to see them, and I think we've had the best advice. VTech is, will be ready to go, and our architects and the Evergreen folks, and I just think it's a terrific thing to do. And
And Don, you submitted a bunch of information in the last day or so.
Yeah.
You know, I know I've had a chance to review it. I don't know, have the other committee members had a chance to look at what was submitted?
No, I only just saw it.
Sorry?
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mimi, I didn't hear what you
No,
said.
I only just saw it, a few hours ago.
Okay. So Don, maybe it would be helpful for us if you were to kind of walk through what that information is in a little more detail. You know, maybe, so you have
Yes.
a quote from VTech and you've talked with Mike McManus at DPW about exhibiting them in City Hall. So, so go ahead. What would you say about?
Well, I think the overall picture, which we didn't know last time, was that VTech and I had a chance to go to City Hall and when I spoke with Mike McManus, he had suggested some other places as well. But VTech and I went to City Hall twice. I think, VTech, are you on the line as well? Were you able to get on? Yeah.
It says someone is entering the waiting room.
Oh, okay.
Really?
I just let
Yep, it
someone
says
on.
306-8354 entered the waiting room.
They should be here, although they're muted.
Oh, that's right, they're muted.
Yeah, I'll just ask to unmute that person.
How about admit?
They're already admitted, but they're here by phone only.
And are they muted by themselves or by us?
Well, I clicked to ask to unmute, but they're choosing, I guess, not to unmute. But
someone from the public, and they don't have to speak. So
yeah.
I had a message from VTech that he was having trouble getting onto the link.
Do you want me to try calling him now? If you, I don't know if I have his number, but I might.
Well,
sure.
With all respect.
I think what happened is I might have had the old password on the calendar invite, but the new one on the email, but you didn't get that one. If you could put in the chat, oh no, you can't put anything in the chat, Don, right? Oh no, wait, I have his phone number. I can call him right now. I just won't be able to hear your conversation, but I'll call him.
Okay.
So,
at any rate, so VTech, we went and looked at City Hall, and VTech determined brilliantly, I thought, that the murals will fit. If people are familiar with the City Hall ballroom, there's the stage at the end, and the murals would fit against the rear wall of that stage and would be a great place to be seen. And I think we agreed would create a wonderful reason, particularly since the stained glass windows, etc., would be a wonderful destination for people to have a look-see and very terrific place to exhibit them. So from that, we were able to look at revising the budget in light of, unfortunately, the increase in the cost of materials, and VTech was able to think of a structure, etc., for the exhibition, and I think it's pretty well articulated in the cover letter, but I'd be happy to answer any questions about it.
go ahead, Mike. You have a question?
Yeah, Don, I'm in favor of what you have proposed. It's reasonable and it's within our budget. And but what bothered me that I did not see answered in your proposal. I mean, we're all hoping that the Victory Theater project is a go and it's a spectacular success and it's restored and it's just a work of art. I think we're all hoping for that.
Yes, me too.
Well, that's good. But there is a reality that should you fall short, monetarily speaking, and the project simply cannot go for the lack of funding. and no foreseeable future of future funding.
Right.
The question is this: when we award you the $97,000, and it's on, you own both tapestries, and they're on display at City Hall for 3 years, 5 years.
Right.
But then
Right.
the project simply doesn't get off the ground. Does
Right.
the city of Holyoke then have to buy the murals off you? Or is it your property?
No,
to own?
I think I suggested, given, that I hope not, a very unlikely scenario, that that MIFA would give them to the city on perpetual loan.
No, that's fine, but that's
Yeah.
MIFA's decision. Is that correct? The MIFA organization, that whoever they are, that committee would come to agreement and say, look, City
No,
of Holyoke-
we would make that a condition of that. My intent was to say was that would be a condition of the awarding of the grant to restore them. That would be built into the understanding.
Okay, so
In other words, there wouldn't have to be another, because, what I wanted to do was to protect the murals, that they be perpetually in the city. And they would, if for some reason the theater was not able to be restored and they couldn't be returned there, that they would belong on perpetual loan to the city.
okay, no, that's fine.
So that means, yeah. I mean, so in other words, to answer your question, no, nobody could sell them, or whatever entity MIFA became or whatever. This would be part of this deal now.
So although MIFA would own it, it would be on perpetual loan to the city of Holyoke forever.
Yes, I mean
Yeah, no, I think.
So in other words, what happens with that is if the theater, if the circumstances are not such that the murals, once restored, can go back to the theater at the time that it was determined that wouldn't happen, I mean, the perpetual loan would be activated. I mean, it would be activated now in the understanding that is what is going to happen. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's fine. And that would be in the agreement that you would draw up for us to vote on. Would that be
Yes.
correct?
Correct.
That would be, right, that would be a proposed term in the contract grant agreement.
Yeah.
That the only way those leave the city's possession is if they're going to a restored Victory Theater.
Correct.
Beautiful.
Yeah, now I would like to, just for the sake of security, look into the whole world of perpetual loan agreements, which is a standard thing that museums do. And, I don't mean to denigrate it in any way, but I think, we will want to make sure that the perpetual loan really means perpetual loan, and that MIFA's successors, should the worst happen and the organization fall into the hands of people who are not as civic-minded as Mr. Sanders is, cannot then be grabbed back in any way. But that's something that we ought to be able to manage with the fine print,
Yes.
assuming that we are all.
And also it's a very good point, Mimi. It's a very good point. That would be covered in that agreement. The flip side of that is what we saw happen at the Berkshire Museum, where we want to protect the murals so that the city can't also, say MIFA disappears, the Victory Theater disappears, everything disappears, and then the city at some point, unwisely 50 years hence decides that they want to sell them. Would also have to be figured into the agreement.
Good idea.
Here.
Good idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's what usually is involved in a perpetual loan. But, the concept is that they belong in the Victory, but if the Victory cannot handle them, they become the city's responsibility and on perpetual loan. And that also the city couldn't turn around and say, okay, we have to raise money for something. Yeah.
And one more point related to this, what happened, I think we should also cover what happens in the unfortunate event that the Victory Theater is bought out from MIFA in the future. And now it's got for-profit owners who, you're gone, I'm gone, we're all gone, but the
Right.
new owners
Mhm.
someday want to dissolve the corporation and sell the murals.
Mm.
But we
Well,
can cover
yeah.
that too, I'm sure.
Yeah, okay, yes, yes. But that's a slightly different thing because we would have fulfilled what we certainly mutually, you as the, in the city, we've put them back in the theater. That's a,
Yeah, there would have to be
it could
some
be,
kind of,
it could be, yeah, that's a tougher one, but it could be built into a sale agreement, for the theater.
yeah, no, I'm confident
But-
that if we're
but,
all
yeah.
on board with the ideas, we can paper it
Yeah.
properly.
Yeah.
And I see Amy has her hand raised, and but before I turn it over to Amy, I would like, rather than, I love this project. I would like to see these murals restored. I am not objecting to doing it in any way. I would like to have until, a week, 2 weeks, whatever, to actually read the paperwork associated with this and make sure there are no further questions that come up. But, other than that, I think that was the big one and we've just addressed it. Anyway, Amy, Kip, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
That's
usurp your
okay.
role.
I'm fading out as chair anyway. You're not hurting my feelings. Go ahead, Amy.
Okay, I just wanted to add that, I did read over everything carefully, and there is one wrinkle in it, which, I consulted Stuart to ask about, and that is that CPA cannot fund the actual installation of a temporary exhibit or interpretation. So it can definitely, it's perfectly fine, and within the spirit of CPA and everything to restore these valuable artifacts and do the restoration and move them where they need to be moved to restore, etc. But the actual moving and installing for a temporary exhibit is not allowable. So I'm just wondering, just a question to Don, whether there could be funding from another source for that aspect, or if that's a big portion.
Right. So just to be, so that I'm clear about it, Amy, we're talking about the temporary exhibition at the City Hall.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the cost of that, Don, what is that in VTech's budget? Do you have that handy?
Yeah, I'm sorry he isn't.
I don't think it was
able to be
broken
online.
out.
It wasn't broken out. I know that I'm sorry. When it came up about that, I actually spoke with him this afternoon because we had talked about it earlier last week about any expenses having to do with moving the murals from City Hall to the Victory and installing them there. And I had interpreted, Amy, what you had sent earlier as possibly meaning that, and that was very easy to say that that could be incorporated into the construction costs of the Victory. So that could be looked at. And VTech's react was that it was a very small amount of money. It was minuscule is what the word he used, but I'm sorry that he's not on the, so that part, but the part about actually what you're saying is installing them in City Hall.
Right. Installing them for a temporary exhibit. Because, everything has to be a capital improvement, which means permanent.
But you raise an interesting point, right? And we all hope it's temporary, but we understand it could be permanent.
Yeah.
So how do you, I guess it depends on which way we want to look at it. But I would think that if, Don, if it was $2,500 or something to get hung in City Hall.
Yeah.
And I'm just making that number up, I know. But, as an example, then we could award $95,000 and, so I would think that, what I've heard from Mimi is she'd like some time to look at the information you've submitted. Perhaps that we can table this until our next meeting. And between now and then, if you could perhaps look at how much of that $97,500 would be, or 97, whatever the number is, how much we would back out of it if we want to call it a temporary installation, which is probably good karma.
Right.
So maybe
Temporarily on permanent loan. No, I'm just teasing. No, my response to that is that makes complete sense. And this was not something that we knew about in, the proposal that we made tonight. My reaction to it is just so that the committee knows is I would be perfectly fine in saying that MIFA could cover the temporary costs, of the installation, and that we would be happy to do that.
Okay. So Mary, you had your hand up. You have a question?
Yes, I think it was partially answered by Mr. Sanders' last comment, but I was just wondering if it can legally be described in a different way. I think that VTech has included a description of construction, so just leave this as construction. The temporary aspect, I don't know, does that have to be called out separately? Can it just be described differently?
I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that because, I mean, this is the project as we know it. So I think we have to, make sure we do this
Personal
correctly.
knowledge. Now that we know that we can't do it, we can't do it.
Right. And,
Okay.
I think it would be, as I said, is it temporary? Is it permanent? And, is it construction? Is it, I don't know the answer to that question. I guess we could all, I think it doesn't make sense to finalize the debate of this issue right this moment, because I think there's an agreement that we're going to take this up as an agenda item under our next, unless someone here wants to make a motion right now, when we could, we make a motion to table or make a motion to fund or,
Well, I'll move to table because, it sounds like we basically have consensus here and we just have some details that need to be worked out. And, I do think that I at least need more time to try to figure out whether there are things like, any further details that we need to talk about and come to an agreement with before we go ahead and then find them coming back to bite us.
and I think that gives us an opportunity also to do some legal research on how we and get an agreement. So hopefully when we meet next time, we can vote to recommend, but also agree what the terms are. So we don't have to wait another meeting to agree on what the terms are. So we had a motion to table.
Second?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Yep. I
All right. So Don, thank you for your time. We'll schedule.
Thank you.
And,
Before Don disappears, I just want to say I did hear back from VTech and he's had a major internet disruption at GCA, he said. So it's not to do with the passcode. He's been trying for 40 minutes and he gives his apologies to everyone for this technical issue.
Thank you. Well, he'll have a chance,
Yes.
for the next meeting. I would just like to say, I think this is a very good way to go, because we're looking at, VTech's timeline, given his responsibilities, et cetera, is, this all to be done by, we figured May 31st next year. So, it's perfectly fine to wait till next meeting and get these, details on that figured out.
get you on the agenda for the next meeting, and my suspicion is that we will have a vote at that meeting and we'll go from there, okay?
Great.
Great, Don, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay, but
Thank
you
you.
don't have to.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So we've tabled that.
Right.
Tabled,
Yes.
agenda item number 3. We're on to agenda item number 4A, which is under the small grant application, Park and Rec, with Olivia, looking for $3,000 for under the historic preservation category, for some work out at the Rock Valley Cemetery. Olivia, are you still there?
She had to head out.
You had to leave?
I
I'm
think
so sorry.
so. It just took a while, I think, for her to.
I'm sorry.
So, the goal is the Ludington Monument, which is the really tall, really catches your visual interest when you're entering the cemetery. Obelisk is tilting. It's gonna fall over. So Bob Como, nicely enough, like went out there and like taped it off and whatnot. And Tamara Condi, who did the work that we paid for, I think 2 years ago at this point, to do some graveyard restoration, has really nicely agreed to like, sure, I'll get on it. I'll do it right now. So it's a $3,000 small grants application for that to be, the ground has to be set and it has to just be fixed. Olivia joined us back. Hi, do you want to, I was just sort of giving an overview if you want to jump in.
Hi, I'm sorry, I was talking with VTech and I had to leave. So I'm sorry, I missed your comments.
So
No, we
Olivia,
just started to go over it.
we're on to your request for funding of $3,000, and Meg just
Okay.
gave us, a thumbnail of what the issue is out there. And so I don't know if you have anything to add at this point, or whether committee members have questions that you could answer. What, if you want to add something.
Sure. The Ludington Obelisk was, seemed to be a problem for the past couple of years. It's probably about, I sent a picture in the application, so it's probably 15 to 17 feet high, and it's broken into 3 levels according to Tamara Conti, the professional who would be taking it apart, resetting the base, putting it on firm ground with gravel, and making it straight and level. And so she was concerned. It was brought to our attention from some other, especially when we have the Rock Valley tour. It was brought to our attention that it seemed to be leaning more over the winter. So, and hence the picture and the request for the emergency funds. So Tamara has planned to do work in the Rock Valley Cemetery anyway, but this took priority because of the leaning, the dangerousness issue.
So I guess I would only add 2 things to this. One, just that I know that CPA tends to like projects that have some sweat equity or other sources of funding. And in this case, there's no sweat equity per se in fixing the Ludington Memorial or Obelisk, because it just needs someone who really knows what they're doing, dealing with this really heavy, massive, tall monument. But the Friends of Holyoke Cemeteries have been going in and doing cleaning. They've been doing biannual or triannual cleanings of the cemeteries. They go out there, they spray the stones, they scrub them down. So there is a lot of sweat equity in some of these cemeteries. And it's just one of these things that is beyond their purview.
Correct. Actually, we have a Rock Valley tour coming up on the 22nd. So, and the obelisk is roped off. We notified Terry at Parks, and she had somebody go up and put caution tape around it, because God forbid it falls, it will not only hurt the individual, but it will probably break the stones too.
Yeah, there are several stones around it that are in danger of being destroyed if it falls.
Mike Falsetti, did you have your hand up for a question?
Well, Mr. Chairman, given the nature, this meets the qualification and the definition of an emergency. That is, somebody may get hurt over this on a public area. So I would like to make a motion that we, under the auspices of emergency funding, we fund the $3,000 and get it forwarded to Olivia and her group and staff, and get this underway and get this repaired. God forbid somebody gets hurt and things go south. So I'd like to make a motion, we fund the $3,000 to do this. And I take it as an aside, Olivia, the other $3,000 for the other grave sites would be done next year. Is that you're thinking? That this is an aside question?
That was our thinking. Yeah, it would
Yeah,
be.
no, that's okay.
Yeah.
No, fine. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to make a motion to fund this.
Yeah, I second it.
Just for clarification, we're proposing to do this under the small grant proposal, right? Which streamlines and doesn't have to go to the city council, not our conventional process that would require. We do have the emergency funding application through our more conventional process.
Correct.
But, what we're talking about is, funding under the small grant, which doesn't have to go to city council. You can just, and the beauty, you qualify and we have the money sitting in the small grant fund right now. So just to clarify, the motion is to fund and seconded under the small grant program.
As quickly as possible.
Okay. So we have a motion and second and open for discussion. Amy, I see you have your hand up. You have something to add.
Yeah, the only thing I want to mention is, yeah, it sounds like this project should be funded immediately, but we do still have to do a contract. I mean, the great thing is, right, we don't have to go through city council, so that speeds it up. But our law department is short-staffed now that Crystal left, so just wanted to mention that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to fund 3,000 under the small grant program. Any other discussion? Anybody have any questions, comments?
Do we have to wait for the contract to actually do the work, or if it's an emergency, is there an arrangement that we can have?
Well, we reimburse, so they at their risk they can go spend the $3,000, and then if we vote to approve, the only risk is that there's something in a contract term that wouldn't be acceptable. I find that hard to believe, and I think what I would suggest is that after we vote, if we vote to recommend funding or approve funding of that, in this case, that we spend a couple minutes just talking about what terms, if any, we want to see in a contract, so that Amy can communicate to the law department, what our wishes for contract terms are. So hopefully we can get this one out sooner rather than later. But again, nothing, I think, there is some risk, Olivia, but if we vote to fund this, we work on a reimbursement. You're not going to get a check up front for $3,000 anyway. So you could do the work and get us an invoice and,
Actually, we would be able to pay the vendor directly because this is a parks project. I think Olivia is doing this jointly with Terry. So it's a city project, which is also makes it,
So,
Yeah,
but
it makes it
also
that much
the same
easier.
thing. It's not like we don't have to pay the vendor up front and then get them to go do the work. Like, so, if you have a vendor that's willing to take payment terms that are based, 30 or 60 days or when you get funded, then, I'm not telling you how to do your business. I'm just trying to point out that we're trying to speed this up as much as we can for you and give you just a little bit of understanding that if you wait for the contract, you might be waiting a little while.
I think this isn't the first time Tamara's worked with the Parks and Rec. She's been over at Smith's Ferry several times before, so she's familiar with the operation, and municipal funds take their time. So
Okay.
as soon as we're approved, we can get her out here to get going.
Okay, so any other comments or questions on the? Go
Do
ahead.
you want to discuss any terms since we want to, expedite this?
Well, let's vote
Yeah,
and then
let's
we'll
vote on it.
we'll take 2 minutes and talk terms. So we have a first and second to fund $3,000 through the small grant program. Any other comments or questions from committee members? All right, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, there you go, Olivia.
Thank you.
So let's just spend a minute while you're still here, just talk and make
Uh-huh.
sure we don't have any wacky terms that you have any concerns about. I can't I can't imagine any terms really at all. It's pretty straightforward. I can't think of anything that I would be concerned about. You know, you're not going to perpetual restriction. You know, it's like it's not going anywhere. Go ahead, Mike. You have something.
No, Mr. Chairman, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm not so sure we have any conditions. It's the property of the city of Holyoke. It's a repair of an existing structure. It's to prevent somebody from getting hurt and having lawyers getting involved. It's a win-win for everybody, for the city especially. I hate to speak in those terms, but the reality is the quicker this gets repaired, the better for everybody. So I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not so sure there's any conditions we want to put on it.
Right, but this is just a matter of protocol that we need to give the law department something to work with for the contract. So, you know, I could just share, you know, the different categories we normally address so that I could, you know, tell her.
So the standard terms, right, would be something like it has to happen within X number of months, right? Like, so,
right.
You know, how many months do you need, Olivia? Well, we'll give you 12 at a minimum. You need more than that?
That would be, yes, 1 to 2 months would be.
Okay, well, let's just say 6, okay, because
6,
things
okay.
happen. So it has to happen within 6 months. What
Mhm.
else would there be for contract terms? We can extend it by 6 months without going, well, this is a small grant. I don't know if we would have to, so we can extend it for 6 more months. Anybody think of any other terms that might be relevant that we want to provide to them? I mean, it's
I think it's
reimbursed, it's $3,000. It's under this category. It goes to the park department, correct? The money?
Yes.
Right, and I guess we could do the same thing as we did for Smith's Ferry with a temporary CPA sign. I don't know if a permanent sign was ever put up for Smith Ferry, and I'm not sure if that, I think that was supposed to be done.
A temporary sign is good. Unless someone else feels strongly. I mean, I think you don't want to be putting a sign on the side of
You know, we have the Smith's Ferry contract. I would think we could basically crib the terms from there. It's a similar enough project.
I think we might have put that they were supposed to put a permanent sign, but I don't remember. I'd have to look back at that contract.
Okay, so
It's an historical site.
It's just having it done by somebody who was, you know, going to follow the historical standards and already in the application.
And then a report due in 30 days.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, so those are the terms we're all in agreement with.
So no permanent signage, right?
Yeah, no permanent sign.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we're all set on that too. Everybody's comfy with the terms. Olivia, you're good?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Olivia.
Hi, Olivia.
Okay, so that's through to so 4B, just to give you a sense of, so I got a call from a property owner who purchased a property on High Street and they had a storefront, and he called and asked if under historic preservation, I thought removing one of those like security grates would qualify. And, you know, it's like, I think so, you know, I think it, you know, and so they talked about putting together an application and submitting it before this meeting. And so that's why I put it on the agenda in case it had shown up, but it hasn't, we haven't seen anything from them. I haven't heard from them in 2 weeks since I had that call.
I heard today from them, and they said they were still putting things together because they felt like they needed to do some sort of documentation around like what it historically was. So they were pulling it together and hoping to bring it to the next meeting.
Okay. Well, I would remind them that if my memory serves, you know, our kind of small grant authority expires on July 1. So
Yeah.
I don't know, we can talk about that later, but just like I said, if memory serves, I think we got a 1 year on the small grant program. And so if they come in after July 1st, they're not going to be in that unless we get that extended. And that's a whole nother, go back to the city council and get that approved again, which might happen, but might not. So that might be valuable. And do you know anything else about it, Meg? I mean, I don't even know where the property is. I know they said High Street. You don't have to.
Yeah, so it is a series of buildings together. I'm trying to remember the exact address on High Street, but it's right next, it's to the very end of High Street next to the Unicorn Inn.
On that side. Okay.
So I know it's in that section of High Street, and it's now been turned into, it was abandoned for a long time, and now it's been turned into a co-working catering and cooking space. And Kai and Eli's is now in that building as well. And there's a third space they're developing as well. So there's 3 storefronts in that building that they've been working on restoring and revitalizing.
Okay. Tell them to
Yeah,
hurry
I
up.
had a, oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think it probably qualifies. So if they want to, they should move quickly.
Okay,
Okay.
you got it.
Amy, you had something you wanted
I had a little communication with them, and I think they were under the impression that CPA was designed for businesses. And so, I tried to educate them and also just, point them to our website and to the CPA Coalition website, and so they can see the allowable categories.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so that's all I had for agenda till we get to other, if anybody has any other. Mike, you have something?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Amy, this is really another, in the true sense of the word. Amy, to your knowledge, do you have any idea on the payment status of TO Design for the work they did at Lady Liberty?
Yeah, I think I told you that I had put that through. I don't know if they've sent the check, but I know that purchasing has received that purchase order. So.
Okay, so it's reasonable to assume that they may have. I was just wondering if you know if they mailed the letter.
No, I don't know if they've mailed a check.
Yeah.
It's a little weird now because I think the treasurer, is it the treasurer who left? So many people have left. I don't.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I was just wondering if, let me ask you this, to your knowledge.
I can email Anna and ask her if they've cut the check.
Yeah, if you could just get a status of the payment for that fellow. I'd like to get the final report from him so we can get a final figure on what it will take to actually do the work. That's what we're waiting on. We can't.
They haven't done the full study yet, but there were like 3 invoices that were put in.
Right. And
so there's still more phases that they have to do.
Right. And as soon as they get the majority of their money, I'm sure we're going to get the report. So I'd like to move it along so we can actually get the report, and we can begin looking for amounts of money to pay for it. So the sooner we find that out, and the sooner that guy gets his check and gets his money, the sooner he's going to give us the report. So if you could move that along, or get back to me or Kip or the committee and just give us an update, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
And the other thing is, this is a question, Amy, or through the chair, the legal department, well, my question is this, or my question is this. Can we as a CPA, with money in our administrative budget out $7,000 that we would hire, with the grace of the legal department, for the lack of a better term, a part-time lawyer for us, that they could expedite some of these things? The more I'm apprehensive that we're being slowed down through no lack of effort on our own, but the sheer volume of legalese that 1 or 2 people in the legal department now have to face. And therefore we, like everybody else, has got to get into the end of the line and wait till we come up to get our case educated. Well, is it possible? Well, what are your thoughts, Mr. Chairman and fellow committee members, of if it is allowable expense out of our administrative money, to hire our own part-time lawyer and give him and for a lawyer, this stuff must be, we're not negotiating buying the New York Times. We're just basic stuff. And we could expedite this stuff and give it right to the legal department and say, look, all you got to do is sign it as the employee of the city of Holyoke. It's all done. The homework's done. And then give it back to us. We'll give it to the city council.
Even in the
and done.
email, Michael, did you see the email where the law department wrote to us and effectively asked us to do that? They were
I
like,
didn't know if it was, I didn't know if we had the authority as a CPA committee to do that.
the law department, said, we're overburdened. Like we don't
That's what I
think
mean.
drafting historic preservations right now seems just like, pfft. So yeah, I think your idea, I was thinking the same thing. If they're saying to us, hey, why don't you hire someone to do historic preservation restrictions? Then I feel like they're tacit in that is that's an allowable thing. And so, and then why can't we then also hire someone to just help us with the contracts? Because I feel like it's been really slow and it's no fault of their own. I know they're overburdened, but it's really slowed some projects way down.
Mr. Chairman, if you would, through you, Amy, if you could ask Stuart Salinger, or through your own knowledge, does the CPA legislation, is that a specific?
Yeah, we can
fundamental
do that,
category?
but just so you know, some of the reason it takes time is also because of the changes that the committee made on language and sort of back and forth between the parties. Like when Jenna sends the contract, they look at it and they say, we want this change, we want that change. So I actually think she's been pretty good at keeping up with most things. But I do think going forward, it's going to be a problem because of the lack of staffing. But one thing, what she did say to me recently was not so much about the contracts, but about the preservation restrictions. That is like a whole other thing, which adds to her work. And she said, she remembered that I once mentioned to her that we are allowed to use, you are as a committee are allowed to use admin money to hire an outside preservation restriction consultant to draft those and deal with the parties on that aspect. And I think that's an area that does slow her down.
By definition, is that a legal, is that something?
Yeah, that's also a legal thing, but it's not the contract. It's part of what some of these applicants are supposed to agree to in the contract. And they have to agree to the preservation restriction also. So that's been a definite slowdown. We haven't had a single PR that's been accepted. And that's why certain, like the first MIFA award has not started, or there's other reasons why it hasn't started, but that has not been approved by them yet. And as you can see, even like Jackson Street is asking for a shorter time for that. So it's often that is the issue. So that might be the area to hire somebody for.
Well, Mike, I
What
think
happened to Mimi?
I don't know, but that's
Mimi's
Mike, I
gone.
think that's a great suggestion, and I would say, just without pulling up the website and looking at what's allowable, there's a lot of smaller communities that have CPA programs. And in those smaller communities, they don't have in-house attorneys. So, I guarantee you that, the CPA committees are hiring outside attorneys directly and paying for it out of their admin funds to be able to negotiate agreements or draft agreements. So,
I think it's similar to how we should do the things that we can do in-house, right? Like I've been taking over minutes, then we don't have to pay someone to do the minutes, right? Good, saved us on admin budget. And then there's this thing like, I don't have the legal expertise to draft a contract. Great, so use money to hire someone to write contracts or to draft preservation restrictions or to help us with the budget. I think those are all sensible things to do with the admin budget. And the question I think is just making sure we have a real sense. I know, Amy, you were going to meet with Ryan soon of like how much is in the admin budget outside of the hours that I know you need to work, Amy, that we would then use for that, right? And is it enough to accomplish what we would want to accomplish with it?
Ryan? I'm sorry, I'm confused by what you're talking about.
Andrew McMahon.
Andrew, oh my goodness, I called him Ryan. My apologies.
I knew who you meant. Okay, good conversation, Mike. I think we should, we should give some thought to whether we have agreements in front of us that we might be able to help push across the finish line by finding and funding an attorney on our own to help. Obviously it's draft an agreement that would go to the law department for their final approval before anybody would sign it. But I think that would be helpful to them. I don't know if we have anything right now. You know, we could have some things. All right, anything else? Any other? Mary?
Is there a motion required for what Mike was requesting? Maybe that would move it along more rapidly if we actually had a motion asking, I don't know what, Amy to look into it, or just establishing something.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Mary, if you want to propose a motion that we investigate the cost of hiring a part-time attorney to do the contract, and what was the term you used, Amy?
So preservation well, actually, it's all the restrictions, whether they're affordable restrictions for housing or for historic. But are you saying now that you might make a motion for an attorney to do both the contracts and the restrictions?
Well, if the need is there, if the need is there, yes, and we've got the money.
Because I think that what Jenna has said is she can do the contracts, but not the preservation restrictions right now. And the thing is, she's very educated now on how it's done. So it might be like smoother if she just keeps doing that, but the preservation restriction part goes to an outside person. That's what she has recommended.
Part of the motion is just, you know, sending you off to go investigate that. And then you can go to Jenna and say, like, is this something that you would like us to pursue looking into? Or do you think, hey, you've got the contracts, it feels smooth?
Well,
that can be part of that.
Okay, well, that's what she's already said to me, but I can certainly confirm that with her. And I know that I did some research in the past about preservation, the only thing is that we might have to get two separate consultants, one for the preservation restrictions and one for the affordable restrictions. And that might be, it is expensive. So
here's what I think the motion was to determine whether or not we can hire with admin funds in accordance with the CPA law, council, and we, you know, and I think I know what the answer is going to be, but you know, we want to determine in black and white that we're allowed to do that. And I would also suggest that maybe the CPA coalition might have a list of, you know, Western Mass attorneys who are performing these types of service for other CPA communities. You know, we don't want to get a typical business lawyer and then try to bring them up to speed on what the CPA program is. Let's find someone that already is familiar with it and understands it. So I think that's the, right, Mary, that's what you were suggesting in your motion, is let's determine whether or not we are allowed to hire outside counsel and experts under our admin fund to accomplish these. Is that correct?
Sure, I'll take the credit for that wording, but I think it was actually Mike that did it.
No, that's fine.
That's fine.
You said make a motion. Mike did a lot of
Yeah.
talking, but you were the one that actually had action.
Yes.
All right, so it was a joint effort. So yes, that's
We
it.
have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, Amy, you got that?
Yep.
Okay. Any other?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I have here.
Go ahead.
Okay. One is that, you know, Rick Dominguez has resigned, so we're actually short on committee members. And even though I've tried to contact city council about that and personnel, I haven't heard anything. I don't know if any of you have heard anything, but I don't think.
I would let Mike Sullivan handle that. Just, you know, he's the city council as liaison between, and it's a city council appointment.
I think I included him, but I'll try to remind him of that.
I would just work 100% through him on this. Let him carry that water.
Okay. The other thing is that I just wanted to mention that, you know, Rosemary's no longer here and Mary is now taking her place, but Rosemary was the co-chair. So we don't have a co-chair right now.
Okay. Do we want to nominate and elect a co-chair for the last 6 weeks of this term, or live without a co-chair? What's the will of the committee?
I'm happy to put myself forward for co-chair, but I don't know if I am allowed to be that and also secretary. And I know none of y'all want to do the minutes.
So, I mean, if it's the will of the committee to have a vice chair, Mike, you're also an officer. Marco or Mary, you know, or we can also nominate someone who's not here. Which is,
I mean, I'd be thrilled, but
Secretary Meg.
I'm looking to simplify a little bit. And right now I'm on 2 other commissions, and I'm a little hesitant to step forward only because.
Mary, you want to be the vice chair?
I clearly do not know enough to actually, I don't know, 6 weeks, 6 weeks. How many meetings is that?
Probably 1.
When's the job done? When do I get to retire?
Probably 1 more meeting. We're going to talk about that next, but my guess is we're going to meet in mid-June, and then that's going to be it until after. And the first thing in July is electing new officers. So.
Well, we could also let it pend if we want until then.
We don't, whatever you want. I don't, whatever you want to do. Up the will of the committee.
Well, I hope between now and 6 weeks, you're not assassinated or anything of that nature. So I think we can get by under your able leadership for another 6 weeks or until July.
That's fine. Okay. We'll just leave it as is, right? We won't have a vice chair for 6 weeks. Any other?
Not that I know.
So let's talk about when we want to meet again. I think we should meet in June. We're like almost mid-May, so maybe second week in June, and that'll be probably the last. And that gives us some time in case something comes up funky that we need to deal with before the fiscal year is over. So maybe the first or second week of June, and then that gives us time to have a last meeting of the year if we need it for something. And otherwise, we'll just go into July.
Well, Mr. Chairman, excuse me, pardon me, Mr. Chairman, the second Wednesday is June 9th, and the third Wednesday is June 16th. Those are Wednesdays.
I would prefer the 9th, just so that buys us that couple more weeks in case something funky does come up. Does that work for everybody?
June 9th?
Yeah.
Yes, it's a Wednesday.
Yeah, that works.
That's fine. Me too.
Let's schedule our next meeting for June 9th.
Someone just disappeared from our group, but there's
Olivia,
still
I think,
a quorum.
dropped off.
Oh, okay.
So that'll give us time if we have to have another meeting in June for some reason. You know, it's like a small grant comes in or something, we have to deal with it before the end of the year. Otherwise, I think we'll have a really small agenda for that meeting in June.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, a quick aside, pardon me for interrupting.
Of course.
Did you get any sense from anybody from City Hall when the City Hall may be open for normal meetings? Any sense of time or anything of that nature? No? Okay.
I have not. I haven't. I had to go down there a couple times in the last few weeks to sign some contracts, but they were still, locked me out. Had to beg them to let me in to sign something. So, Amy, have you heard anything about when they might be opening back up City Hall?
Oh, I think they are opening it soon. I'm not sure if it was July. We did get an email about that. Let me see if I can find that. There was an email about reopening of municipal buildings from Sean Gonsalves, and he said June 1st. The tentative date is June 1st.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Amy. Amy, is that under the presumption that public meetings can now be held at City Hall?
No, I think this is, well, that's not how let me look at it again. I can also forward this to you all. It's about opening to the public. I don't know if that it addresses meetings. It says a survey for department heads will follow this email to assess what each department needs to comfortably and safely reopen. But this is more about the public coming in. It's not about meetings.
No, okay, that's fine. Mr. Chairman, through you, Amy, if you don't mind, could you call, I don't know, the registrar or Terry Murphy, the acting mayor, and ask him, does he have a calendar like August 1st or anything that we could say, yeah, we can now open for public meetings? City
I'm gonna
council
email
meetings?
Sean right now and ask him.
Sure. Yeah, yes, if you don't, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
Okay. I think that's it, right? Anybody got any motions they want to make? One last one of the night?
Make a motion, we adjourn?
Got a
Second.
Second? All in favor?
All right,
Aye.
Everyone stay well.
great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yep.